The United States territory of Guam wants to hold a referendum to help decide its political future.
So let's take a look at where Guam is. If you start here at the U.S. mainland and go all the way around the world, you'll find the tiny Pacific island.
Guam is hugely important to the United States military because of how close it is to the South China Sea and the Korean Peninsula, two potential flashpoints for any conflict in East Asia.
And Guam wants a greater say over military decisions there. I'm Malika Bilal.
I'm Femi OK. You're in the stream. Guam's referendum is on hold for now after a federal court ruled that non-natives should be able to vote. Now, according to local law, only native residents would be allowed to vote. Now, that question will go before a higher court.
The vote is largely symbolic and is viewed by native residents as a path towards self-determination. The three options are independence, free association, and statehood. Guam has been under U.S. rule since 1899 and is home to two critical air and naval bases that provide access to the South China Sea and the Korean Peninsula. 28% of the island is occupied by the U.S. military. Well, joining us to talk more about the referendum Guam is seeking, in Nyonya, Guam, Victoria Leon Guerrero is co-chair of the Independence for Guam Task Force. She's also managing editor at the University of Guam Press. Adrian Cruz is chair of the Free Association Task Force. He's in Hagatna, Guam.
In Manjilao, Dewey Huffer is an advocate for statehood. Also in Manjilao, Robert Underwood is the president of Guam University. He's also a former U.S. congressional delegate, although Guam does not have a vote in the U.S. Congress, which is pretty much why we're doing this show today.
It is.
Malika, where should we start?
I want to start with something that might be a bit controversial. This is a video comment we got from a professor at the University of Guam. This is Ron McNinch, and this is what he told us about who should be allowed to help decide the future of Guam. Have a look.
On the question of Guam's political status with the United States, we've done a lot of polling on this, and about over 90% of the voting public here, the general U.S. citizen voting public, would like to remain at least status quo with the United States, or at least keep their U.S. passport and keep their U.S. relationship in general.
Now, he's referencing a student poll done at his university, the University of Guam, and it included about 384 people, of which 208 were native Chamorros. Victoria, what do you make of that poll and his comments about who should be allowed to decide and what people already think about the status and it being okay?
I believe a lot of it points to the need for more conversation and education on the topic. A lot of what people get through the media is very filtered, and it's not this in-depth look at Guam's current status. And so for independence, we regularly have conversations about, well, what does it mean to be quote-unquote status quo? And really, is Guam's relationship with the United States one that the island really benefits from, or the island could really be able to shape its own future through? And so I think that for a lot of people, we've found, because we've been advocating in the community, we've been having regular meetings and teach-ins monthly, and what we find is that when people enter into this conversation and they learn more and look more deeply into our status today, they tend to see rather quickly that there is a need for change.
Adrian, if there was a vote almost immediately, let's say this weekend, what do you think Guam would decide?
I think Guam would decide one way or another, but whether that choice would be an educated guess is, I don't think we're ready for that.
You sidestepped that question beautifully. One way or another. Adrian.
Yeah, the United States has been involved in Guam for a long time, and patriotism here runs deep. However, there are historical injustices that really need to be addressed, and this whole issue of decolonization just really needs to be settled once and for all.
Robert, I'm just looking here, a blog you wrote recently, Underwood, Keep Self-Determination Struggle Going. Can you give us a sense for people who don't know Guam well, don't know its relationship with the United States? What is that struggle?
Well, that struggle is based upon the fact that Guam is a U.S. colony. It was conquered originally by Spain and then handed over to the United States in a treaty in which the civil and political rights of the native inhabitants were supposed to be protected. And based on that original treaty and the Organic Act, which granted U.S. citizenship to the people of Guam, who were really the Chamorro people of Guam, there's a continuing obligation to resolve this issue. You know, political self-determination is not a general right of U.S. citizenship. If it were, California would be having election on self-determination, or Wisconsin, or any other state, but it isn't. And it's not a right of U.S. citizenship. It is a right of the people of Guam based on their unique historical experience. And sometimes when people comprehend that and fully accept it, then they understand the need to resolve this very, very grievous historical injustice.
Sure. Dewey, what rights do you have? What powers do you have in Guam?
Right now, we are semi-protected by the Constitution, because at any moment, Congress can pass a law overriding the Organic Act, which is in fact the law that gives us our U.S. citizenship. And at that point, we can actually lose our U.S. passports, lose our ability to travel freely throughout the United States. We are not allowed to vote for president. We don't have representation in Congress, but we are allowed to join the military. Right now we are allowed to travel freely throughout the United States. We benefit from a lot of the public services and a lot of public programs, and those are. I know a lot of our population is dependent on that. And that's actually a really good thing, and we're very appreciative for those services and the help that we get from the U.S. federal government. But as I said, a lot of those things, and my fear is that those things can be taken away at any moment.
So I think that's.
I think Dewey said it best.
Go ahead, Adrian.
When he said that basically we're allowed to share in the burdens and in the sacrifices that people from Guam and Chamorros in particular do for the United States. But when it comes time for the spoils and for the benefits, we seem to be waiting on the outside for our handout. And that's just plain wrong.
Well, you know, a former member of Congress from Guam, my immediate predecessor, Ben Blas, said, we're equal in war, but unequal in peace. And that's essentially the quandary of being a part of the U.S. empire. We're part of the U.S. empire as an unincorporated territory. It is based on Supreme Court decision made going back to the time of the Spanish-American War and the immediate era, in which the Guam and a few other territories are designated as actually property of the United States. We are not part of the United States. We are owned by the United States. So the question always arises, when you want to stop being in that quandary, who has the right to make that choice? And who has the right to, when you say self-determination, you have to define the self in that. And people who are arriving on Guam as a result of the colonial authority, it just seems incongruous that they would assert their constitutional rights, so-called constitutional rights, when the Constitution itself is an imposition as a result of this external control.
So Robert, I'm glad
that so uniquely points out the quandary we're in.
Robert, I'm so glad you raised this question. Who has the right to make that choice? We actually got an answer from someone who they have their own thoughts on that. These are two people, Manny and Maria Cruz. They're siblings, and they sent us this video comment.
Alpha I'm Manny Cruz.
And I'm Maria Cruz.
We're Native siblings,
and we support independence.
Our people have been colonized for over 400 years. Our people are second-class citizens without full rights or sovereignty in our home island.
This is a struggle we've inherited from Itatamwatna, our ancestors against the Spanish, and now against American colonial administration.
As an independent nation, Guam could achieve economic and social prosperity by entering the global stage as a sovereign Pacific nation.
Colonies are something that should not exist in 2017. People should not be colonized in 2017. The U.S. has an international obligation to acknowledge a vote for independence.
Viva Independencia.
Victoria, independence, is that feasible, realistic?
Absolutely. And, I think that a lot of people, when you listen to how you opened with McNinch, a lot of people immediately are afraid. They think that things are fine right now. Why do they have to change, right? And what we try to tell people is that, well, we want things to change for the better, that currently we don't have a say in many of the most important decisions that are made for our people. We don't represent ourselves internationally in any international forums. The United States does. And the United States has always made very clear that their interest in Guam is for their military. And so their priority is their military and the Department of Defense and their interest here. What we're trying to say is we need to set our priorities and we need to be the ones having the final say in all decisions made for us. And, as the video said, it's overdue. It's 2017. To continue to tell a group of people that they are not capable of making these decisions. That's one of the biggest struggles that we have, is really, getting people to see, getting people to use their imagination and believe in ourselves enough to know that we are capable of making the decisions that matter to us. And a lot of people fear that, what if Guam becomes independent? Are you just kicking the U.S. out? Is the U.S. leaving tomorrow? Will we lose our U.S. citizenship? Will we lose our passports, as McNinch was saying a lot of people talk about? But independence doesn't necessarily mean that. Independence means that Guam basically joins this global network of interdependent nations, that we have a say, that we can negotiate with the United States what their presence looks like here.
Let me just hear what the biggest problem that there might be with that setup. You have 180,000 people who live on Guam. Adrian, what do you think might be the biggest challenge of actually becoming a sovereign nation?
Well, first of all, as we saw in the video clip, it said that it needed to be recognized, at least for independence. The thing is that, the United States, as all our viewers know, has time and time again just flouted whatever obligations it has. It doesn't necessarily follow anything that the United Nations imposes. And second of all, we are a small place, and our neck of the woods, our neighborhood in the area, is a dangerous place currently. And so would the government of Guam, if the United States chose to pull out, or we became an independent nation, and after some kind of transition period, would the United States agree to stay with its military presence? Maybe, maybe not. And would the government of Guam be able to protect our people should a foreign aggressor come? Absolutely not. And so I think this arrangement of free association with the United States, in which we retain our sovereignty, but we deal with the United States as far as defense and maybe some other policy matters, is really important. Because, of course, another country is not going to protect another country just for free out of the goodness of his heart. There usually is some kind of give and take here. And so, of course, Guam will have to share its burden for the defense costs of our island. And that's something that I'm willing to negotiate to have a net positive effect on our economy.
Dewey,
when
go ahead, Dewey.
Actually, I was gonna say, actually, I think we as a people, we are very, as Chamorros, we're very loyal people. And one of the things growing up, my dad is actually, he's a retired Army infantry man. He was in the military for 20 years. Active duty, and he was actually a soldier on the ground. And I grew up basically believing in what the military stood for in defense and protecting our people's rights and protecting us from invasion, but also protecting freedom and liberties.
Let me just
for
make
other
sure
people.
I understand this right, though. Guam is used as like an Air Force base. It's used as a military base. It's not necessarily there to protect people from Guam. It's there to protect the U.S. from whatever threat they have in the Pacific.
again,
Am I correct in
that's
thinking that?
something.
You can challenge me. You live there, I don't. But I see it as a military base. I don't think the military's there to protect you personally, Dewey. Nice as you are, I don't think they're there to do that. Or are they?
It's not. It's not that clear. It's not that clear binary choice.
Right.
Obviously, Guam offers the United States an enormous platform from which to project its power and influence in this part of the world.
But remind us how it's been used in the past, so people know they can put Guam into a historical context. When has it been used in the past, so people can go, oh yes, I remember that. Just remember us, those little milestones in history.
World War II.
Bomb Vietnam.
Yes.
And also make all those things. The winning of World War II, Iwo Jima was invaded out of Guam. So it has that military purpose. But on the other hand, you have to appreciate the kind of experience that Dewey has had. And the World War II experience of being occupied by the Japanese creates this sense of ambivalence about what it means to relate to the U.S. military. It's not an open and shut case. But the issue for me is not whether the military is good or bad. That's not the issue. The issue is, should the Chamorro people be allowed to make the decision for the first time in their history in over 400 years? And that's the issue. So then once we get over that bridge, and once we accept and acknowledge the issue of Chamorro self-determination, then the conversation begins in earnest as to what is ultimately good for the people. And that's what you have. We're not able to get to that point because you have people who come in 10 years ago, 20 years ago, I don't know, whenever they got here, and then they believe that the history of Guam began when they got here. And
Robert, here, I want to share another reason that our community says we can't get to that point. This is Shannon on Twitter. She says, most Americans generally don't understand Guam's political relationship with the U.S., let alone where we are on a map, which is, of course, why we started today's show with that moving map. Another person, though, is sharing why this is just not a black and white situation. This is John. He says, after centuries of subjugation and implied cultural superiority, as a Chamorro and former U.S. Army, this is hard to reconcile. Like most here, I am both an American patriot and a native Chamorro. We hope the USA does right by us in light of past wrongdoings. Dewey, I see you nodding there, but what does doing right by the Chamorro or the people of Guam mean?
Well, you know, and this is the problem, right? That kind of sums up a lot of what everyone on Guam is feeling. You know, we have this loyalty, we have this sense of patriotism to the family, to the United States. We have a lot of family members that are living in California. We've got some in Texas. We've got some out on the East Coast. You know, and we have this you know, I wanna say that my nationality is American. My nationality is American, but my culture is Chamorro. Now the two don't have to. I don't have to choose one, you know. But the fact that I guess a lot of people are feeling that they have to choose one, that they can either be a Chamorro and
do you want to say that, Dewey? Do you want to say that to Victoria? Because I feel like she does want to choose one.
Yeah,
that
and
is
I
not
believe
the choice.
that no. And I believe that U.S. is very...
That's the thing, though. But a lot of people, right, and a lot of people that are on Guam believe that. This is their mindset. They are believing that we are either loyal to the United States and we stay and this is why they advocate, as Dr. McGee said, this is why they advocate for status quo. No, it's because we don't want to change our American status, right? We like being American. We like the benefits.
Let me give you two instances. Let me give you two historical stories about that. So we're talking about World War II here and our patriotism, but let me just give you two instances. There was a man, a late senator. He's of some note. He's a famous person here in Guam. His name was Carlos Taitano, and he was an American military officer at the beginning of World War II. And in October, mind you, World War II started in December, but in October, he realized that all the American personnel and all the American dependents here on Guam were being moved off to the United States for their safety. And when he asked if his family, since they were his dependents, could also be moved on for their safety, he was denied and told that this was for whites only. And the second point I want to make is that there was another gentleman, and his last name is Artero. He had a lot of property here in Guam. He actually hid an American service member during the war, and he literally risked his neck and the heads of his children and family to protect this man. And after the war, he was even given a U.S. Presidential Medal of Freedom, which is the highest civilian award that the United States is able to offer. And he also had his land confiscated for a military base. And so he sent the medal back because he felt that it was an insult. Here he is getting an award on one hand, and yet the United States military took over his land, which was his livelihood since he was a farmer. Now, where is the justice in that? Where is the fairness for that? Where is the reward we get for our loyalty? It's to be taken advantage of.
Let me just check in with Robert here because, Victoria, just give me a moment because I'm just going to do a nod to Robert's seniority in our conversation, his experience with dealing with mainland USA. And that is realistically, Robert, is now the time for Guam to actually be acknowledged by the mainland and for you to have some kind of autonomy, some rights.
Yes, it's absolutely the time. And the point is that a colonial power always uses your lack of preparation as a reason to delay and delay and delay. And so what has happened is that, and sometimes, of course, they perfume the relationship with a few more dollars so that it makes you feel like, well, I'm going to lose this, as opposed to making an informed decision about what you would like as an aspiration for your homeland. The United States is never going to say, okay, let's do this in 5 years or let's do this in 10 years. You're going to have to push them. That's why this court case is so valuable. I'm so happy about the court case because it gives us a platform to advertise it and tell the rest of the world in the U.S. court system. That's why we go to the United Nations. And pretty soon, we'll probably be going to the International Court of Justice.
But in the meantime, this is a point from Shannon. She says the colonial status of Guam keeps us trapped as the military utilizes our best land and harbors. So we're good enough to die for the U.S., yet we don't get to vote because of our political status. Victoria?
I'm sorry, my children just woke up. Can you repeat that?
That's okay, we completely understand. This point is on the military status of Guam. Shannon says we're good enough to die for the U.S., but we don't get to vote because of that status. So she's questioning whether or not the U.S. military should still be there.
Well, and I think that, some of what you said earlier about the need for understanding history, and even Shannon's earlier comment, that most Americans don't really realize that Guam was under attack during World War II, and solely because of the U.S.'s presence here. So Guam was attacked on the same day as Pearl Harbor. We're a day ahead, so it was the exact same day. It was part of that strategy, but Guam was left pretty much defenseless, and the U.S. surrendered in 2 days. A lot of people on the island were not prepared for that invasion, and the United States, as Adrian said, moved all their dependents out, but left the Chamorro dependents of Chamorro service members on Guam. And this is because the way Guam is seen, even in law, is that the people of Guam, the people of the unincorporated territories, are viewed as an alien race, not deserving of the same rights, and as we experienced in World War II, not even the same protections of the United States. And I think that when we look at history and we look at where we are today, a lot of why our community wasn't prepared then is because we lacked the sovereignty and the voice to know what was being done in our island, what was being done in our region, and how it would impact us. So I think a lot of what I worry about today is that Guam is regularly a target of
Victoria, we're right at the end of our main show. So Victoria, we're going to pick up online on our post show. So we have Victoria and Adrian and Dewey and Robert. We've been talking about Guam's relationship with the United States. Should it have more autonomy? What do people in Guam want? We'll be doing that at #8daystream and stream.aljazeera.com. See you online. Hello again. We're talking about Guam's quest for self-determination and how that might affect its relationship with the military and also with mainland USA. Malika.
So I want to share this video comment we got out of Guam from Amber. She has a whole list of things that she says need attention. Have a listen.
There are many problems we face here on Guam with regards to our current status. We are colonized by the United States. Therefore, a lot of the laws, decisions made are made through the United States Congress, where we do not actually have a vote or a voice in. There is land taking here for firing ranges, military firing ranges. Our water sources are on military bases. The growing homeless population among the native people of Guam. And this is just a short list of issues that we are facing currently.
So she lists a short list, she says, but several things that are obstacles to the people of Guam getting their voice in, as she puts it. So as your takeaway from this conversation for our international audience, for all of you, I'm wondering what you think is the most pressing thing to make sure that voice is heard. Victoria?
I think what Amber was talking about is that currently there are plans to move the Marines from Okinawa to Japan, and already the U.S. military has been increasing its presence here, but the degree to which they want to increase their presence according to their own environmental impact statements will lead to environmental destruction for the entire archipelago that Guam belongs to, which is the Mariana Islands. And particularly in the case of Guam, they hope to place a firing range above Ritidian or Litexan, which is an incredibly culturally rich and historically rich site that has many meanings to many people. There are original landowners that land was taken away from that have always wanted that land back. And then also the northern Guam Lens Aquifer is basically the main supplier of water to the island, because the second major water source, Fena Lake, is on Naval Magazine, and the U.S. Navy actually charges the government of Guam for our water. And so it's become so expensive that the government of Guam has had to almost solely rely on the northern Guam Lens Aquifer for our fresh water as our water source. And so the environmental impact statement says that because of a period of extreme population boom during the construction period, there will be threats to that water source. They're going to drill 11 new wells from that water source, and there's a possibility of contamination. And so when she says it really does impact our resources, that's what it means. Water is a human right. That we currently have to buy our water from the U.S. Navy is an insult to our people. And I think other things that she's talking about in terms of our quality of life largely have to do with the deliberate ways in which the U.S. has really made our people almost solely dependent on them. Guam gets $500 million in federal aid every year. More than half of that goes to Medicaid and food assistance programs. And people always say, well, then if you're independent, how will you make up for that? Well, there's also many ways that Guam is economically stifled, that we don't have to just be strategic in this region for the military. We could be strategic for trade purposes. Right. We could solely by controlling our port and being able to enjoy the fees that people are charged to either fly in and out of our island.
So Victoria, remember this is your takeaway. So guest, this is your takeaway from today's conversation. So I'm trying to pinpoint something that we can all remember. So Victoria, thank you for that takeaway. There's so much more to talk about, but I want to get something from everybody. Victoria, what's the one thing you want us to remember?
Yeah, that we need a voice. We need a voice. That America proclaims to be a place where people have rights and have a say in their destiny, but here on Guam we don't, and that's really important. That is what has been taken away from us here. And I know that regularly you've called the U.S. our mainland, but for me, even when I was living in the United States for education, Guam is my main land. This is our homeland. This is the homeland of a unique indigenous people called the Chamorro Chamorro people who should be respected in our homeland when we want to protect the resources here, when we want to make sure that this will be a homeland for our children and for their children. And continuing to increase the U.S.'s military presence here has displaced
I want to remember
our
one great thought from you. You've given me 20. Thank you. I'm blessed. Adrian, what is your takeaway?
Well, I echo that. It should be about our right, and not just because we're American, but it should be our right because we're human beings like everybody else, and we have a right given to us by our Creator to determine how we want to live upon this earth. And if the United States can't do that, we hope that the community of nations will aid us in that and help us and support us.
Dewey.
My takeaway would be that I believe the people of Guam need to rise up, educate themselves, become aware, and know and realize what it is that's happening and the opportunity that we're given. There is no right or wrong in this. There is only what we want to do and the choice that we can make. And I think that it should be an educated one. And I think people need to make an effort to be educated, and that's really my takeaway. Is I want everyone to understand what's happening, and be able to make an informed decision.
Robert, what's the one thing we should remember from today, from your perspective?
Douglas Oliver, the great anthropologist, said that the rape of Oceania began with Guam. Guam was the first Pacific island to be colonized, and the people were colonized. So the way out of this is to decolonize them, not to make an appeal as a U.S. citizen, but to make an appeal as a U.S. colony, so as a colonized population. So the right of self-determination for the people of Guam emanates from the fact that they were colonized. Now is the time to decolonize.
Malika?
I'll end with James out of Guam. He says Guam will never forget ties to the U.S. and World War II liberation, as he puts it, but being bound to a status as unincorporated without representation is unacceptable.
Very good. Good morning, guests. Was it worth waking up that early for? I really appreciated your time.
And I think we can all agree. I think we can all agree with that. That the status we have now is unacceptable. Are we angry at the United States? Do we want to totally get rid of them? No, I don't think so.
You're starting a new debate right there.
I'm putting my trainers on back under the desk. I'm like, no, take the trainers off. Dewey's still talking. Guests, thank you so much. It's been such a pleasure. When you go and check to your friends if they watch you, they would have been able to stream you. And then in our subsequent broadcasts, you'll be able to see us on Al Jazeera on TV around the world. Thank you for your time this morning. Take care, everybody.